Hello, everybody, and welcome. We've got a ton of people joining Tito and I today. Super excited. For those of you who I've not met before, I'm Dave Kennett. We're going to do official intros in a minute once we've kind of got critical mass here. And we've got Mr. Tito Bohrt. Tito. Let's see who we've got joining here. Wow, we've got a great group today. And let's just go through a couple quick housekeeping items right before we dive in here and before I pass it to Tito to kick off. First of all, we're going to really work to make this as inclusive, participative, is that a word? Participative, and impactful as we can, so that you leave here with not only being part of the discourse on supporting my theories, because they're usually, the right ones, right, Tito?
I don't think so. We'll get to that in a second. I see the participants skyrocketing.
Yeah,
people joining. Thanks for joining. We'll give people a couple minutes as we go through that. But yeah, you were talking about housekeeping items.
Yeah, a few housekeeping items. So Tito and I have many interesting conversations, and they're respectful, but they often get heated, and I expect nothing less today, in a respectful way, of course. And we're wanting your thoughts on a whole number of things. So we want to pull you into the conversation. And if you haven't been on one of these webinars recently, there's actually a way to jump in the conversation live. So Alex from Sales Hacker, who's working the controls, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A and just put live. And then when it comes time to question period, he can actually give you the instructions. He'll ping you with the instructions on how to go live, and you'll be able to actually join in Zoom here. So a couple things, we recommend putting it on gallery view so you can see all the speakers as we go. Right now it's just Tito and myself, but hopefully there'll be some participants as well. And there's no moderators. There's just Tito and I having a real interesting conversation on some very relevant topics that we hear from our customers all the time. So with that, Tito, I'll pass it. I see we've got 182 people. I know like over 900 people registered. I'm sure we got more trickling in, but let's respect the people that showed up on time. Over to you, man. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, awesome. Good to be here. Thanks everybody for joining. As Dave said, do type live either on the chat or on Q&A if you guys want to join live. What I'm very interested in is hearing from people who have been account executives or are account executives right now. And have been there for, 6 months, a year, 2 years. You have enough experience that you've had enough conversations that you can chime in something interesting. We'd love to bring you into the conversation and get your thoughts on it. The area that we're really going to be focusing on today is on that first scheduled call. So we're not talking about a cold call. We're not talking about a second, third, fifth, seventh demo, even though it says death after demo and how to prevent it. What we really mean is that first scheduled call. And it might be a 15-minute discovery call with an SDR, or it might be an hour-long, let's say, call it discovery call as well with an account executive. But how do we grab that prospect that has not yet, talked in depth with your company? At most, they've had a quick cold call or responded to an email. And how do we ensure that we move this person forward in pipeline and we maximize their chances of becoming a client as time goes by? We won't necessarily specialize in one sort of deal size or anything like that. We can talk about the differences between maybe SMB and enterprise, if need be, if people have specific questions. But we'll try to talk about the things that we could generalize to be good practices, and we will talk about what we believe are bad practices as well. And I would say between Dave and I, we talk often. I'd say once a week or so, we hop on the call, and talk briefly. And I would believe that we agree on maybe 75% to 80% on what are the good things that you should always do. And we disagree on about 20%. So I'll kick it back to Dave to start with maybe some things that we agree on. And for people who are joining, love seeing in the chat where you're joining from. I see Jeff from Canada here, Percy from Munich, Germany, pretty late at night. Thanks for joining. Florida, from California, and so on. So back to you, Dave.
Okay, great. So first and foremost, we agree, I think, Tito, that when you look at the SDR role, I believe there's no tougher role out there. And what's the goal when you're an outbound SDR? Well, you want to generate curiosity, right? And so when you generate curiosity and you get that first meeting, that initial meeting, lots of people call it IMs, they call it discovery, what have you. What's the goal of that IM? What's the goal of that initial meeting? And sometimes they're 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, what have you. And that's maybe what we can think on first is, I think it's really to generate more interest so we can get to the next meeting. Also educate, but also really start to understand what the actual challenges are that they're facing. We know that when there's a nice, warm inbound lead, there's already probably a pain point there, or at least there's some interest. But when we've got someone jumping onto a call with us, they're maybe for the first time in an outbound generated lead, they're definitely curious, but they might not know they've got a pain point. They might not be aware that there's a better solution out there. They might not have, and often don't, a line item in the budget for what it is we're about to sell. So in essence, we have two sell jobs in that initial meeting, right, Tito? It's like, number one, we need to bring to their consciousness in the forefront that there's a pain that exists that is solved out there, almost like painting a future state. Paint that delta and get their buy-in that, oh man, I'm interested in actually learning more. So I think it's like, we've got all sorts of best practices and tips we're going to share from all of the Replayz reviews that we do. Because if you don't know, we review hundreds of initial meetings. And Tito, who is, as everyone knows, specializes in the art of the reach out, is going to share his as well. But do we agree on that first level set, Tito?
Yeah, I would say so. Let me recap what you said. So first prospect might not come with strict interest, especially if it came through outbound. It might just come curious. And the goal of the first call is to build excitement, to educate the prospect, and to build alignment on what are we trying to achieve. We're not expecting budget to be there as of the first call. And the purpose is to build gap, AKA to get to an agreement to what is it that we're trying to do, and how is this motion going to move the organization forward and impact an important KPI, right? KPI, yeah. Key performance indicator. If it's marketing, it might be cost per acquisition or cost per lead. If it's sales, it might be sales velocity, whatever, pipeline, revenue, whatever else. So I think on those things, we're really clear. I think there's other things we agree upon. You'd be crazy as a person running that first meeting as a vendor not to turn your camera on. Yeah,
100%. Big time Replayz best practice. It builds connection, credibility, rapport. Have a look at this, Tito. Do you feel as connected to me with my video off? I mean, okay, I know that you probably are going to say something smart here, but
I would have already won the debate. If you don't show your face, I think the audience would go with me, just because they can relate to how I'm talking and so on and so forth. I think it also matters how you're dressed. If you show up with a broken shirt or with a hoodie and you don't look well put together on morning, just got out of bed hair.
Yeah.
Camera on isn't always the best. And your background might matter too. I see you're using a virtual background there. I don't think you're behind a brick wall right there. Is that?
No, not virtual. I'm gonna let the team in on, look, it's actually a projector screen with a backdrop. But let me throw this at you, Tito. I didn't hear you mention the word pain once yet. And when we have that first call, we need to understand pain, don't we?
I hate the word pain. And I think this is the first thing we disagree with, because I've worked at several companies. I've never had an internal discussion with anybody talking about pain. A director of marketing doesn't go to his VP and say, you know what, we got some pain. They talk about challenges and opportunities. The director of marketing might come to the VP and say, hey, Mr. VP of marketing, I was analyzing our Facebook ads, and I think there's an opportunity to change the way we target personas and get a better ROAS out of our ads. He never talks about pain. So I hate when a seller comes and says, hey, tell me about your pain points. Because I don't call them that. And we got to use the lingo of the prospects, ideally.
I agree. No, I'm with you on that. But I think it's super important to have a hypothesis of need, right? And that's actually a Borsight thing, right? Where it's, you go into the call as the account executive taking that first meeting, you presumably talk to hundreds of people who have done that role, like the persona that you're selling into. So you probably have a pretty decent hypothesis of what some of their pain points may be. So Replayz is the best practice to definitely say, you know, what we see generally out there for folks in your role is that they struggle with this, this, and this. You know, when you look at those 3 buckets, does any of that resonate with you? And then that usually gets an interesting conversation going, no?
Okay. So before we dive too deep here, I want to take a step back and talk about the 3 different types of buyers that show up to an account executive meeting. Because I think there's 3 very distinct sorts of conversations that you can have, right? And I'm going to start with the one closest to buying, and I'm going to take a step back and then another step back. So the one closest to buying, as an account executive, I've had calls where somebody comes into a demo or to a meeting with me. It's our first conversation, and here's how they go. Hey, Tito, I've already talked to competitor X, Y, and Z. I know exactly what requirements I have. I know exactly what I need, and I got 2 other quotes from other people, and I need to sell this to my superiors or to my team in 3 days. I just need a quick demo and pricing what you got. That's conversation number 1. I think the way you handle that conversation is very different from conversation number 2. Take a step back. I got other prospects that come with a different mindset. They come, they say, Tito, here's the deal. I found a couple of problems that we have internally at the company. They don't call it pains. They call it problems or challenges or opportunities. Yeah. And I've realized I can improve X, Y, and Z metrics if I could just have a better solution for this. I haven't talked to too many people. I don't know exactly what my requirements are. I'm early in the process, and I'm probably going to talk to 10, 12 vendors, and then I'm going to narrow it down to 3. I'm going to go deeper on those 3. I might do a trial. I might buy, right? That's a second conversation. And then the third type of conversation, which is even earlier, is the guy that shows up and says, I don't even know why I'm here. I got no pains. I got no challenges. I don't understand. And most account executives might say, why would anybody take a meeting? Well, these are the outbound meetings. You call him up and you say, hey, Dave, I want to bring you into a meeting because I think that we can do X, Y, Z for you. We can improve this metric. We can do that. We're going to blow your mind. Just give us the opportunity to meet and present with you. So these are outbound source meetings where there's no internal project. There's no specific need. There's no gap. There's no metrics. There's nothing. They're just showing up, expecting you to blow their minds. Now, really quickly, I'm going to talk about BANT because that's the most common thing that I hear from everybody, even though you and I both hate it. But in all these, in these 3 sorts of conversations, B as in budget is hardly ever present. If it's present, it might be present only on the first type of conversation, which is they've already talked to other vendors. They already got some sort of idea of pricing, and they kind of know their budget. Might not be accurate, right? Authority, it's kind of interesting. The latest conversation, it's usually not necessarily the person who makes the decision, but it's an influencer who has access to a committee they're about to present. On the second type of conversation, they're early in the process. It might be somebody with very little authority. It might be an intern that was assigned by the CEO to go explore 10 options and then bring me the top 3. So authority on the second case is not there. And in the third case, where they're very early in the process, you actually do need authority, and it is the responsibility of the SDR to go get authority. When it comes to need, explicit, implicit. If you're late in the process, they're about to buy, they know exactly what they need. They actually have their requirement. On the inbound lead that are very early, they also have some sort of like need that is like explicit. They kind of know the metric they want to improve. On the outbound, there's no explicit need. They don't know what they need, but we need to go find it. So that first discovery call is all going to be about building gap and illumination. And timing, usually the third one is the only one that has very explicit timing. The second one is kind of wants it somewhat soon, doesn't have a specific timeline. On the first one, there's no timing whatsoever. There's no project. There's nothing. We're very, very, very early.
Yep.
How do you think about those 3 buckets on the BANT qualification for the 3?
Yeah, I think that those buckets are fair buckets to put people in. I'm not a big fan of BANT in terms of the person that just gets called out of the blue by an SDR and is curious enough to show up. Yeah, we don't want to be asking anything about hey, did you have budget for this? It's like, dude, you called me. What budget would I have prepared for this call? I'm with you. Timeline. There is no project timeline right now. So I agree that the farther they are down the qualification cycle, the more they look like an inbound lead, smell like an inbound lead, the more a BANT kind of style is interesting. But let's throw this to the audience. We're going to ask a few questions in a sec here. We wanted to kind of set the scene the first 15 minutes or so, and they get super interactive. Let's do a quick poll. So we're going to throw a poll up here around how people look at outbound versus inbound leads. Okay, so we're going to throw a poll on here. We're going to take 15 seconds to fill it out. Please just rush in there and fill this out. So here are your choices. I treat outbound leads either A, way different than inbound, B, a little bit different, C, about the same as inbound.
Yeah, let's give people a little bit of time here to respond. I see about 100 responses have come through, and we'll give them a minute or two. And Dave, what is as they trickle in? Do you and I agree or disagree on this one? I'm not entirely sure. I know my answer.
Right. So you and I disagree. So I'd say a little bit differently. But the irony there is, and you would say?
I would say way differently.
Right. What's interesting though is there's 2 or 3 key steps that I would treat differently. And those key steps are way different than, so it's everything else is the same except for 2 or 3 key things, which we'll get into in a minute.
Okay. If we look at the polling here, obviously way different has won. So I'm correct and you're wrong.
Clearly, by far and away.
47% of the audience says that inbound and outbound are way different, while 45% of the audience says they're a little bit different. There's actually 8% that says that inbound and outbound are about the same. So seems like I'm on the camp of 47% of people. You're on the camp of 45. This seems almost like a tie, even though it's like winning the Super Bowl by 1 point. So I'm the winner, but we're very close. We're both good arguments. I'm just giving you a hard time. So give us your reasoning. How do you treat an inbound lead? What are the first questions you ask versus an outbound lead?
Are you talking about me, or are we going to the audience now?
No, you. And then let's see if the audience agrees. Maybe we'll let Alex let us know if people should chime in here or whatever. But let's continue this for 2 more minutes.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple things. Let's just talk about structure real quick. Structurally, we're big fans at Replayz after watching hundreds of these discovery calls and initial meetings of whether it be an outbound generated or inbound, of you build rapport and introductions and you set the agenda, right? And if for everyone listening, like that, those 3 steps, we see the top reps, regardless of inbound or outbound, doing that every single time. Agree, Tito?
Yeah, I agree. You say, hello, I'm Tito. I lead whatever. Here's, the agenda I wanted to follow today is XYZ,
roadmap, right? And then always important to check in after the roadmap, say, how does that sound to you? Right? We want to develop this time together. The most precious entity any of us have in this world, I think, is time. I believe that. And we want to value their time, especially when often these are executives who they don't jump on calls just for their health, right? And so the next step then that you and I disagree on, and I think this is important, is to say, I'm really curious. When you talked to Mary the other day, so Mary, the outbound SDR, when you talked to Mary the other day, what was it that piqued your interest to actually invest this time with me today? I think that is.
What if they actually didn't talk to anybody? What if this was an email reply, or if this was a demo request and it came straight to the account executive?
Oh, then it's irrelevant. I mean, the AE should know that. I'm talking about the use case of SDR passes lead. I've got notes in my CRM. These are the 3 things they talked about. And now I'm saying, what piqued your interest? I think that's, I'll tell you my case for this first, and then I'll pass it to you. I think it's super important because something piqued this person's interest enough to actually spend time with an absolute stranger. And I want to know what that is, right? And that usually gives me a pretty darn good place to start in my discovery. Yeah. But I'm going to pass it to you, and then we gotta hit the team up here for their thoughts. But go ahead, Tito.
Yeah, I would disagree with that question because I just don't like the way it's phrased. Going back to my theory, there's 3 different types of discovery calls. I'm ready to buy. I've talked to other people. I'm early in my process, and I don't even know what KPI I'm trying to influence.
Yeah.
I say the question shouldn't be what piqued your interest. I think a better question to ask is, where are you in the journey? Right?
What journey? What journey? How do they know they're on a journey? You just said that they
everybody. It is my belief that everybody's in a journey. I'll give you examples. I'm in the journey of everybody who's here, who's coming to this webinar, is on a journey to improve the way they handle first meeting calls. So the way I would phrase it is as follows. Hey, Dave, where are you in your journey? Let's say I'm selling you marketing automation software.
Sure.
Where are you in your journey of marketing automation, right? Do you already have a lot of tools and you have some problems that you're bumping into or some challenges that you're running into? Are you early in the stages of starting to explore marketing automation as a solution? You don't yet have anything in place? Or have you not even yet heard of marketing automation and what it does and how it helps and what metrics it influences? So then I can a little bit better explore where you are. Now, many times I can get that context through the demo request or the inbound request, or sometimes I can even do research. I know exactly where you're at. Like, I sell sales development services. I can go on LinkedIn and see if they have SDRs. If they have SDRs, the conversation is a little bit different than if they don't have SDRs. If they just raised a Series A 3 months ago, it's a very different conversation than if they're a Fortune 50 company that has 300 SDRs. I don't need to necessarily ask the question, and that might vary a little bit. I might say, what is the initiative that prompted you to reach out if it's an inbound lead? Or if it is an outbound lead, I'd say, hey, Carrie or John or whatever my SDR reached out to you. I'm excited to meet today. Hopefully we'll have a productive conversation, and you'll and we'll end this call with you leaving feeling excited and having learned something about marketing automation.
Okay, fair enough. I get the context now of the journey, and I hear what you're saying there, and I actually think that's a decent framework to put it in. Let's throw this out to the group. So we want to know, how do you guys think that it's important to do a quick level set and ask what piqued their interest to actually take the call in the first place? This is assuming an SDR actually reached out to them. And while we're waiting for Q&A here, Alex, I know you're queuing up a couple here. This is one from earlier on from Jeff Swan in BC, who we know. Jeff, how are you doing, man? And it said, talking about pain, how would you go about identifying a pain hypothesis before a call? The way to do that is to really think through, based on the persona of the person you're talking to, put that up against the personas of the folks in the past. Hey, Katie, we'll get right to you. Sorry, one sec. And then that way, if you've talked to, let's say the CMO is your buyer persona typically, and you're talking to a CMO. Well, if you've talked to 20 other CMOs and you know what they're looking for, you know what they're interested in, then that's a great place to start. Oh, there's Jeff there. Jeff, hey. Do you want to unmute? And does that answer make sense, buddy?
Can you repeat that a little bit? I got a little distracted by the video thing.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so we're going to answer Jeff's question, then we're going to go to Katie's question or comment. So, Jeff, I was saying that to have a hypothesis, it's important to look at the buyer persona that you're about to talk to. And let's say they're a CMO. Then you think through, okay, of the last 30 CMOs I've talked about, what do they care about? What keeps them up at night? What's the thing that, and of the ones that move forward with our solution, what is it that they love about it? And then that will give a hypothesis of, okay, what are some of the likely things that are going to resonate with this individual? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, awesome. Well, hey, thanks for jumping in with that question, Jeff. Really appreciate it, man.
No worries.
Jeff runs an awesome outbound company, actually, doing SDR sequences. He's helped us out. Thank you. Katie, how you doing? Please introduce yourself and love to hear your question. Oh, you're on mute right now. That's our fault. Sorry. There we go.
Hi, this is Katie. I am an account executive with Jade Track. We do energy management software. Jeff, you have a giant microphone. I don't have a giant microphone, but thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you.
From marketing to sales, so I'm still learning, and I really appreciate this content. My question is, in initial prospecting calls, how do you strike a balance between qualifying the lead, so asking questions and kind of listening, versus establishing that framework and educating the prospect on what you do? I feel like it's a delicate dance there, so I would love to hear more.
I love this question. Tito, do you want to take a first swing at this, man?
Yes, of course. The first thing I'll say is You're never allowed to ask a question that you can find on your own. So I hate the, oh, where are you based out of? Or, hey, how many employees do you guys have? Or, hey, how much money have you guys raised? Or, what is your role in the company? I hate that. Nobody's allowed to do that. You got to do 10 minutes of research. Once you get good, I can literally do my research in 3 minutes. I go on the LinkedIn profile, I go on the company website, I go here, I go there, I check jobs or whatever. In 5 minutes, I am there. The next things is, I would say most of the questions that you tend to ask, or for most organizations, the qualification or are you qualified enough to talk to us or not qualified enough to talk to us, can be very much discerned online. You don't hop on a call to be like, are you qualified or not qualified? What you want to understand more than anything for the majority of companies is where they are in your journey. But maybe tell me more, like what are some qualifications questions that you and your team ask constantly? What do you need to find out?
Yeah, I try to find out if they're using any software that might be a competitor, and how they're kind of working through that process. So I think that speaks to like where they're at in the journey.
Great. Any other things that you want to find out? Because really what you're trying to do there, which is what we recommend as well, is, okay, if you're already using another software, what you're really, you already have a very different type of mindset and context. You already understand what the software kind of does. And I just need to beat the current software you have in many areas, and then we win. If you've never used the software, I might need to take a step back and give you an overview of what is the purpose, how does it work, how much maintenance does it take, how quick is the ROI, what can you expect, and it's a different sort of conversation. So I agree with the journey. Other than that, what are other questions you ask in that discovery call?
Yeah, I ask if they're currently looking for a solution, what their timeline is, budget questions as well, because different types of organizations are on different budget cycles, and kind of understanding, does that need to go through a committee? Like who is the authority figure in the organization as well?
Okay. Now that's interesting, because I think that sometimes those questions, if it's the first conversation, they might feel a little bit invasive. Like somebody asking me like, oh, who's the authority who's going to sign up on this? I haven't even seen a demo. I don't even know if you're better than my current provider. I don't even know what KPI you move. Like, I'm not going to just throw all that information. Give me value, and in exchange, I'll give you a little bit more information. The mindset that I have as a seller that I coach my sellers on is be a partner, AKA a consultant to your buyer, rather than trying to push him off and try to go to the decision maker. If you push him off, you'll get them mad. If you work with them, it'll be better. So I think a good way to ask timeline is, by when would you like to see this fully implemented and working? And then they say, okay, I really want it for January 1st. We got to have this 2021. Okay, great. That is interesting to hear. Later on in the conversation, I'll give you the timeline of how long it takes for us to implement, to kick off, to do this, to do that. And then we can plan, how quickly or how slowly we can move to get to your objectives. And that's an important key phrase, to get to your objectives. It's about you helping them rather than you asking questions for your own purpose of forecasting. But yeah, I would also, unless they're using another solution, I would not necessarily ask, what's your budget, especially if you're on the high end of the market. I think you can demonstrate value in other areas. If they already have another solution, you can maybe ask how much are they paying for that, or do they know how much they're paying, or when the contract's expiring. But other than that, I tend not to ask budget questions early on.
All right, I'm going to jump in here. Katie, thanks a lot for the question. We're going to move on to the next one in a second, but I'll take a swing at this real quick as well. And I'm aligned with what Tito's saying. Additional context on my thoughts, though. One, that initial meeting needs to be a give and take. Number two, I agree there's questions that you ask when you're further down the funnel, and there's a higher level of comfort level on both sides as opposed to up front. I also think that questions are just super important to understand context before you get into solutioning. We all know that, right? And Katie, you mentioned that. It's like, when do I get into the solutioning versus questions, and more about our company. So one of our Replayz best practices, and Tito and I are not aligned on this, is, and that's good. That's why we have discourse. It's important, is just a real quick 30 to 60 second level set on the company. Like, hey, how much do you know about our organization? Not much. Oh, let me tell you a little bit. Because what happens is sometimes the sales rep doesn't do that until the end. So there's question marks the whole time that the prospect has about the company and what they do. And then oftentimes a rep will spend 5 minutes on that part, and it's not necessary. You just want to identify that you've got street cred, whether it's size of organization, scope of organization, current customers you deal with. Have a couple customer stories absolutely ready to go, right? Do them in all in under a minute, so you're not taking too much time on it. But it's super important, we think, to have the right set of questions first, and then go into solutioning with the idea, and even mentioning it to them that way. I'd be like, Katie, I just love to ask, if it's okay with you, like just 5 or 10 minutes more questions. Because honestly, we have a deck we'd like to show you and a demo and that kind of stuff, but I don't want to like show you the same old boilerplate stuff we show everyone. I really want to understand, more about your business, and even see if there's anything relevant we've got. And if there is, I'll show you that. How does that sound? So that's how we approach it. Make sense, Katie?
Yeah, thank you so much. I got to take notes now.
Thank you. I love it. Great to have you join. Max, over to you. What question have you got for us?
Right before that, I'll throw 3 things that I want to add here.
Okay.
You're talking about pain points. You mentioned earlier today what keeps you up at night, and you're asking, does that make sense? And I think those are 3 horrible habits of AEs. Anybody who says what's keeping you up at night, I absolutely hate it. Nothing keeps me up at night other than my 2-year-old that cries too much. And then, does that make sense? Is a condescending, making me feel like I'm too dumb to understand what you're saying. I rather ask, where's your head going? Are you aligned with what I'm saying? Are you seeing the world the way I'm seeing it? Or things like that, so we can be level set and not be condescending.
Oh, we're big fans of open-ended.
Clapping on the comments. Yes, let's go.
Hey, Tito, I'm clapping too. I'm glad you called me on that, because we're a big fan of open-ended questions. One of our Replayz best practices is at the end of often sales reps will go 5 minutes without taking a breath. And we recommend a check-in every 1.5 to 2 minutes, and not saying the typical, any questions, or does that make sense? But meaningful check-ins, questions like, how would you see this deployed within your organization? Or based on how this, you mentioned that you had a demo earlier on today. How does this compare to that? However, Tito, when I said, does that make sense? That was more in terms of when you're setting an agenda or when you're asking permission for something. So there's the context. Max, over to you, man. Thanks for jumping in. What question do you have for us today? We got to unmute you first. There we go.
Here we go. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, let's hear a quick introduction, and then over to you for questions.
Excellent. My name is Max McCready, coming out of the Illinois, Chicagoland area. Currently an account executive over at Jellyvision. We sell HR software that helps employees better understand how to choose and use their benefits. My question relates more so to a point you brought up earlier, Dave, and it's one that I've personally struggled with as well as tested. So I'm very curious about your insight, Tito, yours as well. You mentioned as a part of discovery, it may be helpful to potentially have maybe like a slide or a point where you bring up, hey, here are some similar challenges that others in your role in your industry are facing. Do any of these resonate with you? I'm curious, how does this limit your ability as a sales rep to facilitate a truly open and honest conversation? Because the argument could be made that you're pigeonholing that individual you're talking to only be thinking about those specific challenges, as opposed to maybe something else that's on their mind that become turned off to bringing up because they don't think that that's going to be a focus that we can help out with.
I love it. And that's where, Tito, if it's okay with you, I'm going to take a first swing at this one. Because so that's my issue with Tito's customer journey thing. When he used the example earlier of where are you on the journey with respect to automation, that pigeonholes everything into automation. Now, if you're selling automation, then that is actually fair context, right? And so in that context, it makes sense. But this is where, Max, I think it makes a ton of sense to think through what are your key 3 differentiators, right? And how do those pair to the pain points, the main pain points you hear from your existing customers? Can you use that word Tito hates, pain? And but I agree with him. We don't bring that up. We don't bring that word up with a prospect. And then we take those buckets and say, there's multiple buckets we hear CMOs struggle with respect to the solution we provide. Usually it's blah, blah, or blah. Any of that resonate? So what we're doing is we're starting with the funnel up here, right? And we know that we don't solve for stuff outside of those 3 things anyway. So if it's out of scope, we don't want to cover it anyway. They are like, they key in on one, then we can go down the path and really start to understand level 2, level 3 pain. And then we can jump to the other one and go down. And maybe it's like, no, we got this covered. Anyway, and you hit the point about slides. I hate slides. I really, and Tito and I completely disagree on this. I think slides can be used in initial meeting. Near the end, I prefer not to, because I think as sales professionals, we're paid to be great communicators. And I think people feel sold to if they have slides, even if they're great slides. So yes, I believe that we should leave them with valuable insight. They leave that meeting going, man, I actually would have paid for that conversation. I learned so much through industry benchmarks, customer stories, internal benchmarks. And that's the end part. After you've done the discovery and after you're doing the solutioning a little bit, or at least getting them interested enough for that next call. But I don't like using slides to do it. I know Tito is probably chomping at the bit to actually give a response to that. But before I do, Max, does that all make sense? Any thoughts on that?
Oh my God, don't ask, does that make sense? Please, God. Max,
You know what?
back here.
Can we mute Tito? Alex, how do we mute Tito?
That,
Sorry, Max. No, I'm joking. Max, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, no, that definitely does make sense, and I appreciate the check-in, Dave. And that's actually not necessarily trying to go down a separate tangent, but that brings up another great question of slides versus no slides. I've definitely been in both camps before. More recently on discovery calls like this, it's more so no slides. That way I can instead focus on being in the moment as opposed to trying to get through the information that I was planning to cover, right? Leads to better discovery, leads to better illumination, but that's a whole separate tangent that maybe we can get to. Tito, curious about your thoughts on everything.
And then we're going to get to Nathan. So Max, thanks a lot. Tito, you got 1 minute. I'm just joking, man. Say as much as you want, but then Nathan's been patiently waiting. So go ahead, Tito.
Yeah, Max, here's what I'll say. Like, you should be very well aware of the problems that you solve, right? And what are the benefits that you bring to the prospect. I'll give you a very easy example. What if, like, you are, call it sales loft, and some prospect comes in and says, oh, hey, you know what I need? I need a tool that allows me to, like, blast the fuck out of my market and get more meetings. Like, that's their mindset. Now, a bad account executive will be like, yep, we got the tool for you. Look at this. You can put the prospects here and blast 500 emails a day like crazy, and it's amazing. If my AE closes that deal, as a VP of sales, I'm pissed, because that's not the purpose of the tool. They're misusing the tool. They're going to hurt their email reputation. They're going to hurt their URL. They're not going to be happy clients. They're going to churn in a year or so because they're using the tool the wrong way. And now they're going to be really pissed at the company, and they're going to recommend against us. I much rather have the rep have the 3 scenarios. If somebody says, I want to blast the hell out of the market, you say, wait a second. Okay, help me understand a little bit more here. Why do you want to blast the hell out of the market? Oh, because I want more leads. Oh, you want more leads? What do you think about calling? We don't like calling. Oh, you don't like calling? Very interesting. What I want to share with you today might be some ideas, might be some best practices from other clients that might spark some ideas. I want to show you the framework that other clients use to create a consistent customer experience that maximizes the leads that they're able to source. And the way they do that is by being multi-channel. I'm not saying you need to use calling, but you can use maybe email and LinkedIn or direct mail. We have partnerships with Sendos and so on. I'm not going to get too deep into the details, but I think a multi-channel strategy might be better. Tell me more though. Who else have you talked to? Do you know anybody who's being successful right now blasting the fuck out of their market, right? And you got to reframe the conversation. And then ideally you have good customer stories, but you really hone them into, like, what are the specific problems that you solve? And I believe it's easier to do things visually. Like, if you explain to me the idea of a cadence, like call, email, whatever, I kind of get it, but it's much easier if you say, let me share my screen really quick, and you share and you show me a calendar with, like, a phone and an email envelope, and then another phone and another email envelope. So I like visuals. I'm not saying a deck, and you should never use a deck that you just follow slide 1 after slide 2 after slide 3 after slide 4. That sucks. Don't do that. But if you have, like, 20 slides that are great visuals and the conversation goes towards a certain direction, you say, I have a really good visual for this. Let me show you what a cadence looks like. This is a best practice. I think that's beautiful. Shows you're prepared, shows that your beliefs are set on paper, and you're not just, like, being agreeable and, like, blast the fuck out of the market. Yeah, of course we can do that. Of course, yeah. You want to sign here? Pushy,
All right.
asshole
All right.
salesman. You know, that's the type of person who would ask you, does that make sense? Can you blast it? Does that make sense? And then just try to sign it. And I just disagree with that strongly.
Tito, you're not passionate enough, man. You need to work on your passion, I think. And by the way, we should all play a drinking game. I'm going to drink a shot of my wheatgrass every time I hear the F-bomb from Tito. I love it. Max, thank you, buddy, for jumping on. Nathan, over to you. What's your question, man? And welcome. Please give yourself a quick intro.
Hey, my name is Nathan. I'm coming out of Knoxville live to you guys. And so my question is, I guess maybe taking a bit of a step back more to the foundations of what you guys were talking about in the beginning of the webinar. So with respect to that, the differences between the inbound and the outbound calls. I'm currently part of an organization. We're a very young sales organization, really exciting time where we're transitioning from, the organic inbound traffic that we had generated to where now we're ready and we're going outbound. So one of those questions that's coming up is, how well do we qualify these leads before we pass them over to the account executive? So that being said, with your experience, how much time is an account executive dedicating to taking those outbound calls? How rigorous do those qualifications need to be? Do you have a take on whether or not, hey, if they'll sit in front of me, sure, whatever, I'll talk to them. Or, is there a little bit more that needs to be done to make sure that you're, effectively working your pipeline?
Great question. Tito, this is your world, man. The old, hey, if they got a pulse, we'll talk to them kind of thing.
Right.
Tito, you take that away, man.
Yeah, let me. I'm gonna use a visual here because I think it's gonna be helpful. So you're gonna laugh at this, but here's what I believe to be true, and this is the easiest way to explain it: is to bring a visual. I believe that when you're targeting inbound and outbound, is different, right? So this matrix that you see here is my qualification matrix. This is just a sample thing. Imagine you're Salesforce.com. You sell CRM, right? What your criteria to talk to somebody and sell them CRM is they got to have at least 50 employees and 4 sales reps. That's when CRM becomes helpful. So you have 2 leads, one that's 52 employees, 4 sales reps, growing 4% a year. And they have another lead, as you can see here, thousands of people growing a lot, 300 million in funding. Now, why do I show this visual? Anybody who's in the white area doesn't have enough employees or funding or anything. Those are disqualified. And your outbound team not only should not be reaching out to them, but I also don't think they should be reaching out to the orange area. What I mean is, if I have an outbound team, I want them on my top right corner. I want them to be reaching out to the organizations that, as a profile, they're overly qualified. If your highest paying customer is Verizon, if you get a meeting with AT&T and you're trying to qualify them, you're kind of crazy. Like, their biggest competitor is your biggest client. Come on, they should be a great customer. Now, the way to solve that is through account-based sales development. Don't just spray and pray. Don't go after anybody and everybody. Figure out who are your top 10, 30, 50, 100 clients, and what do they have in common? What is the problem that you solve? And are you sure that you can solve it for them? Depending on the organization, I know organizations that sell to companies that you can improve their Facebook ads. Okay, first thing you should do is look at their ad library. Are they running ads? Are they running more than 10 ads? Are they running more than 100 ads? That will tell you if they're qualified or not. So on the first, especially outbound demo, the prospect doesn't have a project, doesn't have an explicit problem. They likely have an implicit problem. If you're working with their competition and you're helping them in a very significant way, then there's an implicit problem they're unaware of. So it has to be an educational call. How do you like this visual? Helpful? Beautiful. Seems like visuals are the way to go.
I think visuals can be good, but only when they do stuff like this. So that's my 2 cents. I just put that together while you were talking. Nathan, thanks for your question. I appreciate it. I haven't got much more to add to that. I think Tito answered it great. Okay, we're going to do a quick poll now actually on slides. So we want to know how often you're using slides in your initial meeting. So in an outbound generated lead that's passed you, what percentage of the time are you using slides as part of that meeting versus not using slides? Okay, well, this is.
And I'll tell you, as we talk about this, I'll tell you what I hate. I hate when I come inbound to a company. I was just doing this. I was switching my ATS recently. And I knew the players. I was using Google Hire. They got discontinued. And I was talking to Lever and Greenhouse and I don't know, like 7 other companies. And I came in and I'm like, hey man, here's the deal. I have Google Hire. I know exactly what I need. I want something similar, reasonably priced. What is your guys' strategy? And the question I get asked is like, so Tito, what are you using? I'm like, I'm using Google Hire. I'm like, oh, okay, great. Let me take notes here. So you're using Google Hire. Okay, great. And how many employees do you guys have? I'm like, dude, it's on LinkedIn. Like we're like 27. He's like, okay, great. And quick question, like how many people are you hiring right now? And like those discovery calls suck. You can ask all those questions via email early on and just get the information that you need in that discovery call to make the first conversation as productive as possible. And then when I'm showing up, what I want as a buyer, when I'm coming to buy something like an ATS that I've already been using, is at least I need some sort of visual to help me understand how are you different from Google Hire, right? That's the only reason I'm taking a meeting. Everything else I can find on your website, I assume. No?
Yeah, those are great points. No, absolutely. The poll results are in, Tito, and most people agree with me. So the question was attendees. So do you use slides in your initial meetings? So 25% almost always, 22% sometimes, 54% basically never. And I'll be the first to say that, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think they have a place the odd time in an initial meeting near the end if they're picture paints 1,000 words, if they help, just like that slide you shared. Okay, but let's get to some more questions. So anything, Tito, or is there anything you wanted to add before we get to some more live questions here?
Well, I'm a little bit surprised that so many people don't use slides and they actually are very happy with not using slides on call one. And I'm not necessarily saying slides. I'm saying visuals, like not sharing screen, right? I think the question here is maybe misphrased in the idea of using slides. I think you need to share screen. If you have a easy demonstrable product, you can just share screen and share your product. But as a heads up, us as an organization, we are interested in improving the way that we align our goals. And we've stumbled upon OKRs, or other ways to get our leadership to set specific goals and have the rest of the organization align towards those and work towards those. So I'm looking forward to, if anybody here has a solution similar to that, I'd love to join a discovery call, and see if you can sell me without slides. And I'd love to record it and then analyze it in the future, criticize it, put it on YouTube or whatever. And then I want somebody else with slides. So if you sell any of those, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to take a demo just because you're attending my webinar. So thanks for coming.
I love it. I love it. Okay, we've got a question from Robert. And Robert, are you able to join live here? I'll read the question. What if you're an early stage startup and you want to show some slides with logos to build credibility? There's Robert. And we'll just give Robert a sec to join. So yeah, this is that age-old question, right? Do we do the logo slide, right, or not, in an outbound generated first call? Robert, can we unmute Robert, Alex? There we go. Robert, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep.
Hey, man. Welcome. Quick intro, please.
Yeah, Rob Scheckman here in New Jersey with a company called Altisales. I'm VP here. Just wanted to know, does it make sense to show some slides to kind of build some credibility with some large logos that we're working with if we're an early stage startup? I'll
take a first swing at this. So I think building street cred early is important. I don't think it's best to be done through slides. And I think it's important to talk about what logos you work with. We've got this Replayz best practice where we say, do a 30 to 60 second about us, but start with the pain points you solve for, right? So with Replayz, for example, when we do it about us, I don't start with, we're this company headquartered here and this is how big we are. I talk about one of the biggest challenges, as you know, with call coaching is it just doesn't get done. Despite sales leaders' best efforts, the average rep's getting call coached once a quarter. And when people are getting coached to, they might not actually have the right framework to coach to. And we solve for those two problems. And so that's one effective way to do your about us. But when you do the street cred part, I think it's super important to talk about through the course of the discussion, some of the amazing customer stories you've got that will resonate with your prospect based on the needs you've uncovered, or pains, as Tito would not want to say. But Tito, how do you think how do you think about the logo slide?
Here's the way I think about it. Do you have it on your website? And if so, when your customer goes to your website and sees all those logos, how is that different, right? So I don't think the logo slide is a mandatory slide to have in your deck. I wouldn't necessarily use it. I usually have it very far down in the appendix. And when somebody says, but do you work with companies like us? And I actually have it like vertically oriented or company size oriented or average deal size oriented in different ways. And I say, yeah, companies, what, in the AI space? Yeah, here are 3 customers in the AI space that I can mention and tell you about, right? But similar to my example below or before, if you work with Verizon and Verizon has an NDA, you can't use their logo on like your website, and all of a sudden you have a meeting with AT&T, I think you should definitely mention that you work with Verizon. Like, it'd be crazy not to. And I'll tell you another thing that is true, and this comes from just my background in psychology. Stuff that is written down is believed more easily than stuff that is mentioned on a phone, right? A lot of the communication that we as humans have is not just verbal. A lot of it is like body language. And when you actually show somebody, like, why do you sign a contract, like a paper? It's because papers are believed to be more credible. So do I think you need to show it every time? No. If you have some good logos that align with the client, would it be helpful sharing? Most definitely.
Awesome. Okay. Hey, thanks a lot for the question, Rob. We appreciate it. That makes sense?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Already.
I'm going to keep saying that. Thanks. I'm just trying to get more wheatgrass shots in my setup here. All right. We got Andre. Are we able to get Andre live here, Alex? There's a question we've got.
Andre. I see Max and Conrad are here on the call. Maybe we'll go to one of, Max already spoke, I believe.
We already talked to Max. Well, I've got Andre's question right here. So I'm going to read it out. I'm struggling to scale the inbound team by having a work frame for the first meeting. So a framework for the first meeting. Usually we close the deal in 1 to 2 meetings. So it sounds like probably more of a emerging market sort of transactional type fit. The issue is, how can you create a framework when each inbound lead comes with different questions and problems? How can I have some kind of script without losing the flow of the conversation? I have a lot of thoughts on this, but Tito, I'll let you go first this time since I went first last time, unless you want to kick it back to me.
No, I don't think I followed exactly the question, so I'll go to the Q&A and reread it while you answer it the first time. Yeah,
so I think what I'm hearing is, how can I get a consistent framework for my inbound leads? And I think, not knowing what they're going to be asking, and everyone's different and that kind of thing. I think it's a fair question. I think I'm not a big fan of scripting. Sure, have a couple talk tracks here and there, but have process. If you teach your reps process, they can get out of absolutely any corner. If you teach them a talk track, that's going to get them on hitting a brick wall, right? From time to time. So framework, here's a quick framework for that first call. It depends on whether it's transactional or enterprise, but if you're closing in 1 or 2 calls, my guess is it's transactional, probably a 2 to 8K ACV. And if that's the case, I would call it a 30 to 45 minute meeting, discovery and demo. And it's, build rapport, introduction, set the agenda, a little bit about the company, 60 seconds, no logo slides, go through discovery to really understand their needs, and then screen share based on their needs. Don't show them the same old demo all the time. And I hope that doesn't sound confusing when I'm saying screen share, and I've just been telling you this whole time I don't agree with it. It does have a place, especially in an inbound fit lead, where the expectation is at the end of the 30 to 45 minute discussion, you will have given them enough information to actually have a pretty informed opinion. Tito, how do you think about that?
I think that's about right. And yeah, I agree with you. If you teach your reps how to get out of corners, you just saw Dave say no slides, no screen share. Now he was in a corner where he had to screen share, and he just said use screen share. So he's really good at getting out of these situations and then changing his opinion very quickly. You can be a brutal politician, Dave. Great job there.
Hey. Outbound, no slides. Inbound demo, slides. You know what, though? A quick point on that. On the inbound lead, here's one thing I really encourage, Andre, for you to think about is so many people, when they hear demo, sales reps, they think, 1 wind me up. I'm just going to start talking, and I'm going to really try and have the mental model of this is a conversation supported by a screen share, like when you're doing the demo, right? And when you think of it that way, as opposed to I'm showing you all the things, it's a lot different. I see we have a question from someone named Dara, who I think, Tito, you and I have both spent time with in the past with different organizations. Opinion on the webinar pitch. Is it good? And what shape should the resulting demo take? Product demo or product agnostic webinar? So do you want to give a bit of context on what he's asking there? You know what he means by the webinar pitch, right? Like when you're teeing up a first meeting and you're going to educate them with these screen shares?
I'm not seeing that question exactly. Where did that come through?
Oh, okay. Here.
Opinion on the webinar page. Is it good? And what shape would the resulting demo take? Product demo versus... I think here's what I believe to be true, right? Every leader out there, regardless of the department they work in, marketing, sales, operations, IT, engineering, whatever it is, they are trying to make their organizations better, right? Imagine you're the marketing team at a consumer packaged goods company, right? And I call you and I tell you that I'm going to teach you how Dollar Shave Club creates their TV ads. You've heard about Dollar Shave Club. They've gone viral like crazy. They're incredibly successful. Even if you're a bigger company than they are, that is a great AKA logo to mention or client to mention and say, I just want to show you how they do it. Here's the process of ideating, blah, blah, blah. Here's the process of this, here's the process of that, and here's how they make things viral. I think that's very informative. And me as a VP of marketing who's about to launch Facebook or TV ads, I'm very interested in that. Same thing, like a lot of people know me, have joined this meeting because of a post I put out there. What if I told you I was going to share with you all the tips and tricks on how we build cold calling funnels, email templates, cadences, recycling leads, and all the tricks about sales development best practices from me? Yeah. I don't care if you don't run an SDR outsourcing company. You might have a team in-house. You might be a 500-person company, a 3,000-person company, or a 50-person company. You care because I'm good at what I do. And I'm not going to tell you my secrets. They're super valuable. So is the pitch of, I'm going to teach you something valuable? Yes, if and only if you actually have valuable information. If I'm like, I'm going to teach you something valuable about sales development, and then you show up and I'm like, hey, I'd like to sell you services. What are your pain points? Then
no, fair enough. And that was Dara from Virtua Gym, by the way, and who I know you've done some work with. That was just a fantastic question. We're actually running out of time now. We've got 2 minutes left, so I think we're going to have to close her off here. Conrad, I see Conrad's joined us. Conrad, if you want to do a quick 15-second intro on question, maybe we can squeeze that in.
Sure, thanks. This might be coming out of left field, but with regards to your way different approaches, inbound, outbound, would you guys say you would change your perspective based on if you're selling a solution that's value add as opposed to value create?
I think we need to define value add versus value create. I'll tell you how I split my world of products. I think there's commodity and non-commodity. Like if you're selling chairs, right? You can ask for a budget in the first call because everybody knows what a chair is used for and it has a limited use, right? If you're selling a car, unless you're selling like super high-end cars or specialty cars or whatever, but if you work at Chevrolet or like Ford or whatever, you can ask, hey, what's your approximate budget? What type of car do you want? I think those are very fair questions. But if you sell outreach.io to somebody who doesn't understand what a cadence is, you can't ask for budget and you can't, like the process is very different. So give us your perspective. Give me an example of a value add versus a value create.
Actually, can we do this? I apologize. Just to keep it on time for everyone here, we're running up on an hour in about 15 seconds here. So I hate to cut it off. Maybe we can continue the discussion in the Sales Hacker community thread. We'll have a special thread on there where we can continue the Q&A. Does that, Conrad, does that work for you?
How about you just guys do another webinar?
All right, man. Sounds good. We'd love to. Right, Tito, you up for it?
I'm up for it. Alex,
right.
We should plan that, or we can get the audience's advice for what sort of content would you want us to cover in the second one? What have you learned? What do you guys want to see? I'm more than happy to always share, be an open book, and have a good discussion. So thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you, Conrad. Just to wrap up, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I've really enjoyed it. Always fun getting so much participation, and always fun hanging out with you, Tito. We got a special offer as well. We're launching this Replayz Masterclass that has our 100 best practices, and Tito is the very special code name. So if you want half off on that, go to replayzmasterclass.com, just input Tito, and you'll get 50% off when we launch in November. Really enjoyed this. Tito, any last comment? I'd love to hear from everyone on LinkedIn too. Please hit up our LinkedIn. Tito, anything last from you before we sign off?
I did not sign up for that specifically. I get no commission on it, and I guess I can now say I'm an influencer when my name is the code for a discount code. So I'm excited about it. Dave does a really good job on coaching people and teaching them how to be good AEs. So I haven't seen the course myself, but I have no doubt that it is this very high quality. So I'll go check it out. And thanks for making the code Tito. I appreciate the shout out.
Hey, thanks so much, Tito. And right back at you. There's no one better out there than driving amazing qualified outbound source leads. So thanks a lot, everyone. Have a fantastic day. And hopefully we'll do this again soon. See you, Tito. Bye, guys.